answer questions towards the end of today's presentation. To submit your question, click the question mark icon on the right-hand side of your screen. And we are recording this, and we'll share the recording with everyone in the next few days. So let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about strategic leadership, and we have with us Kevin Miller. How are you today, Kevin?
Good, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing great. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I've been in IT for about 20 years. Started off as a developer, front end, back end, database, anything you can imagine. Eventually, I went into project management, and then shifted my career more to change management. And when I made those shifts, I instantly started to manage teams and manage groups of people, and it was a big shift. It always is.
Oh yeah, definitely. From contributor to manager is always tricky. I think maybe a little extra tricky in tech.
Yeah.
So when you're managing prioritization and things like that, how do you determine the number one thing to work on?
Well, the number one thing to work on should be something that's important, right? You have an option to work on what's urgent and to work on what's important. And you want to work on what's important. Those are your long-term goals. Now, you can't throw away your important, urgent items, your short-term goals. You have to get those done. But after that, you want to focus on the not urgent and the very important things to work on. And you want to avoid the trap of working on something that's urgent, but isn't very important. That'll help you do prioritization. Tommy Van Skyke and Jason Alba have a couple of great courses on Pluralsight for this. It's all about time management, but really it's just always thinking about, is what I'm doing right now important? Is it important short-term, and is it important long-term? If it's not, don't do it. It's as simple as that.
Yes, definitely. I've been in the trap of urgent but not important.
Yeah. It's an illusion, right? It's someone else placing their urgency onto you, and you've got to be careful, right? It may be important to the organization, it may be important to your team, and in that case, you do want to take that into consideration, even if it's not at the top of your list. But if it's not important to the organization, to the team, or to your personal goals, you really want to avoid that trap of falling into the urgence. And so it really is about time management. And that is something you're going to have to master to become a leader, is time management.
Absolutely. So how do you make an environment to make prioritization, having one top priority instead of, everything being top priority?
Yeah, that is the trap with working on what's important instead of urgent, right? Because you'll have 10 important things. And I don't know who said it, but I heard the quote, if you have 4 top priorities, you have no top priorities. And that's the truth, right? You need to have one top priority. And what I use for that is what's called an ITIL to measurement trail. ITIL is the IT information infrastructure library, and is available out there for anyone who wants to view it. I actually have a course on this called Managing IT Metrics and Measurements. But what the trail does is it brings you from the organization's vision and mission at the top all the way down into their goals, their objectives, their critical success factors, their KPIs, and at the very bottom are the metrics and measurements. So everything you do should tie back up to that vision. And whatever you're working on, you want to make sure that you compare those multiple top priorities to each other. It is tough. You want to insist on priorities, though, from your boss. And when I say that, your boss is going to say, well, Kevin, you have 10 top priorities and they all need to be done, right? Everybody's heard this. And you need to insist. You need to go back to your boss and you got to insist, hey, I need some help with this. I see 7 of these are important, 3 are not, so I'm not going to focus on those. But the 7 that are important, how do I determine what's the most important, right? How do I determine what to work on first and what to work on second? And I got to be honest, when I went back, and it takes guts, right? It takes guts to go back to your manager and to say, hey, you've given me too much. I know it's all important. I want to do my best. Help me with this. And I found that managers really appreciate someone who's going to put their feet to the fire and say, I need help with this. Help me determine what's most important. Now, you can work on it together, right? You can work on it separately and kind of come back to each other. You can get outside opinions, but ultimately, if that boss doesn't know, he or she needs to go to their boss, right? Because they may not know. And so it's kind of holding their feet to the fire to say, hey, I really need you to help me determine what's most important, because if you don't make a decision, I'm going to make a decision. And that decision may not be the best for the organization. It may not be the best for the company. It may not be the best for you. So, but once I make the decision, once you make the decision, you got to stick to it, right? So if there's 7 items on there and you're just simply not getting any direction, pick one, start working on it. If it's wrong, you'll find out very quickly. You know, when at the next time you get together with that person, they're going to say, hey, what have you been working on? And you say, well, I've been doing A, B, and C. And they may say, well, why not D, E, and F? And you say, because I had to choose between those 7 things, right? And so once you make a decision, you want to go back and you want to stick to that. And the last thing I'll mention on this is, as a manager, you need to remember when you were in the shoes of your employees and your teammates, how it felt to have 4 top priorities and getting pulled in 4 different directions, right? And so you want to show empathy. So when you become a manager, you need to show empathy to someone, and you need to help them, right? If they're struggling, if they're saying, hey, I really just don't know which way to go and this is too much, you need to go back and you need to think about how you felt in that situation, and you need to work with them on it. So showing empathy as a manager, you know, instead of showing authority, you want to show empathy. It's very easy to say, you know, hey, Jeremy, you know, you get paid enough and you should be able to figure this out. That's very easy to say, right? The hard thing to say is, Jeremy, we have a lot going on here, and I know we're asking a lot of you. So why don't we take a look at it together, and we'll figure out how to best use your time.
Yeah, and I really like that point of expressing empathy, because it can be very scary, especially if you're, you know, a junior engineer, you're just starting out. I know when I first started out, I will totally be transparent and say that I did not ever want to go to my boss and say that I was overloaded, right? Because I'm like, I'm just out of school. I'm just getting started in this. Everybody knows I'm new. And the last thing I want to say is that I can't complete all of these tasks. So I really like that you brought up that empathy part, because, you know, after a few years, of course, you start to get a little more confident, and you're like, hey, you know, I've been doing this for 5 years or whatever, and this isn't going to happen. I already know this isn't going to happen. It's really easy. But there in the beginning, when you're a junior, or if you first started a company also, that's another time where you don't want to raise that flag. So I really like that you bring up that point. You know, having empathy as a manager will help you be less scary and more approachable when that time comes.
Yeah, it's tough, because when you have to go to your manager and you have to say, hey, I need some help. I'm having difficulty selecting between what I should work on because everything's a top priority. The tendency is to feel like a failure, like you can't do it, you can't figure it out. But in reality, you're actually doing something very good, right? You're saying, I need you. You're my manager, right? You're getting paid more than me. You should be able to help me determine where is the most value that I can spend my time. And so you're going to them instead of making the decision on your own. You're going to them and you're saying, I need a little guidance here. And so I think it's a very good thing to do that. And as a manager, you just need to remember what it was like to be in that other person's shoes. And then, of course, lead with empathy. And I think we actually saw a comment there. Let's see. Yeah, lead by empathy. That is exactly what Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella mentioned. And that's from, sorry, I can't pronounce the name, Puliar. Thank you, Puliar.
Yes, thank you for that. Satya is one of my heroes, actually. Yeah. Like everything great about Microsoft that's happening right now probably ties back to him in some way. Yeah. So for the next question, how do you manage overloaded team members? And I know you've seen this. I think we've all seen this at one point or another. It happens far too frequently in our industry.
It does.
But how do you manage, you know, overloaded team members, like single engineers or even entire teams?
Yeah. So one of the things, after you figured out what your top priority is, or maybe you haven't figured out what the top priority is, and you're spread too thin, right? You're working on too many things at one time and you're not getting anything done. Everybody's been in that situation. And that happens, and it can lead to burnout. What I would recommend is, as a leader, recognize the signs of burnout, right? You yourself may have experienced it, but even if you haven't, you need to recognize it in other people. And that can be tough. I'm going to butcher the name here, right? But Barry Librex has a great course on managing the signs of burnout. And I think once you recognize that you're overloaded, you have to accept the facts, right? You have to be able to say, I simply am not going to get this done in a reasonable amount of time. Now, if you're a salaried employee, right, it's always a gray area, right? Do I work my 40 hours a week? Do I work 45? Do I work 60, right? You've got to find that balance with you and your organization and your manager and your family, right? But you have to accept the facts. You can only accomplish so much in a given period of time. And you can't sustain 60 hours a week for, a year, 6 months. It's too much for anyone. So accept the facts and then understand the iron triangle, right? So you have good, fast, and cheap, right? Pick any two. Right?
Yeah.
I didn't invent this, right? Everybody knows this. Good, fast, and cheap, pick any two. If your organization and your project is focused on quality, that's great. If they're focused on speed of delivery, that's great. Those two things are going to be expensive, whether that be getting more people, purchasing more tools to make things faster, whatever that is. Good and fast is going to be expensive. Now, if money is an issue and you want fast and cheap, okay, quality is going to be an issue, right? And of course, if you want cheap and high quality, it's going to take a long time, right? And so those are the types of things you have to consider. So whenever you're given a new project, maybe start at a newer organization, you got to find out what those two constraints, the two most important constraints of that triangle are. Is the organization about quality and speed? Are they about keeping costs low and speed, or keeping costs low and keeping quality high? You need to do your best to find out what those two constraints are. Now, every manager is going to say, I want all three. I want good, fast, and cheap. And that's what I hired you for. Okay.
Yep.
Good luck. You got to accept the facts here, right? These are just facts. You cannot deliver all three. And anyone who tells you otherwise, they're clearly on a job interview, right? So you want to be able to recognize which two are the most important in your organization and work towards those two. It may not be the two that you agree with. Understand that, right? I have worked at organizations where it was fast and cheap. It pained me. It pained me to not put out the highest quality that I knew I could. But the organization that was paying me wanted things fast and they wanted things cheap. And so it was mediocre quality at times. Now, it's up to me if I want to stay at that organization or not, but that's what I was paid to do and that's what I had to deliver. So it's up to you to recognize what those two most important things are and work towards them. So I think, the iron triangle is a big part of it. Recognizing burnout, that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah. And sometimes it's okay to do that. I think as engineers, especially people who are an engineer at their core, they want good, fast, and cheap too, right? Even the developers. But sometimes you have to look at what your end goal is and what are you building? Are you building software for an airplane, or are you building a shopping cart? Right. It's pretty obvious to see which way to get rid of the quality. And yeah, sometimes it's better to step back and say, okay, what are we building and what is the most important?
Yeah.
Because aircraft quality software, of course, has to be super high quality. It could be a little slow release, but if you're out there building the next Twitter, you're going to have to build that fast, and you're going to have to move out those features fast, and going to have some breakage. So
yeah, definitely. Speed is definitely anything that's digital, right? Speed is important. You want to be first to market, but you're right. Anything that's not digital, anything that's related to safety, you got to have the high quality. And something else I'll mention on this related to the burnout. Everybody's heard of scope creep, right? Where you work on something and it was supposed to take a month, 6 weeks, whatever, and it ends up taking 2 months, 12 weeks, and so forth. The trap that you want to avoid is what I call hope creep, right? And this is when you start to fall behind and someone says, hey, you're a little bit behind. When do you think this done? Do you think you can still hit the deadline? And you say, yeah, I can still do it. And what you're thinking in the back of your head is, well, I'll just work a little more. I'll work a little harder. I'll get rid of those distractions. Maybe I'll log on Saturday and Sunday and I'll get this thing done. And then Saturday and Sunday come around and you're not up for it. You're not ready for it. Or you have something else pulling at you, right? And so then the next week comes around and you're still behind and you feel this overwhelming pressure and you still have hope that you can catch up. You got to avoid the hope creep, right? Accept the facts. You are where you are. and adjust accordingly. You're giving your project manager, your resource manager, you're giving them ample opportunity so that they can pitch in and do their job and help coordinate this. And you could figure out why you fell behind later, but you don't want to fall into that trap of thinking, I'm going to catch up. And that just goes on and on and on, right? Jeremy, you've created Pluralsight courses. I create Pluralsight courses. I've fallen behind, right? I've had a 3-month contract and I've fallen behind, and all of a sudden month 4, month 5, and I have my editor saying, hey, when's this going to get done? Oh, it'll get done next week, right? I still fall into this trap.
Same here.
But when you recognize that, if I just slow down and say, you know what, I'm behind. I thought I was going to be done in 2 more weeks. I want to tell you 3. I'm going to tell you 4. So I can have a little wiggle room, because something else is going to pop up in those next 3 weeks, and it's going to make me fall behind again. So avoiding hope creep is a good piece of advice that somebody gave me, and I'm now giving you.
Yeah, I will steal that term from you if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
That's great. Yeah, I've definitely been in that position, and you can fool yourself. You can have a few days of just hyper productivity and think, well, the last 3 days have been, amazing. So 3 more days, I'll be done with this. And then reality sets in and knocks at the door.
Yeah, you get a phone call, an email, an urgent thing, and all of a sudden those 3 days are gone. And it's best to just say, you know what, take a step back and reevaluate.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so managers versus employees is our next topic. How do you avoid the manager versus employees mindset? The kind of them versus us.
Yeah. So I would say there are 2 different types of this scenario. One is when someone you work with gets promoted into that manager role. You already have a relationship. That's actually a little tough to change that relationship, because that person does have a burden now of being the manager, right? And then there's someone who's outside, external, who's hired into the manager, or maybe you go to another company and you're the external person coming in, but it's a new relationship, right? So you have an existing and a new. The existing relationship, it's not so much an us versus them. In fact, most employees, I would venture to say, think they have someone on the inside at the manager level, which is great for them. That can somewhat be true, but of course that person does have like the burden of being the manager and getting things done. With an external hire, either yourself or that manager, it can be viewed as an us versus them scenario. And what I would say is, as a manager, you don't want to just talk about the technical details, right? And this is a lot harder when you have an external hire, right? You don't just want to say, hey, how are things going? Are we on schedule? Are we on budget? How's the scope going? You want to talk about some of the social things. How's everyone behaving in the meetings? Is everyone cooperating? Do you have any issues with any of your teammates? Is there anything I can help you with? Right now, you don't want to hide your head in the sand and not talk about the social things, right? But at the same time, you don't want to take on any leaping monkeys. Okay, and that's a balance.
Awesome.
I think, Jeremy, are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my computer froze there for a minute. Sorry.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So you don't want to hide your head in the sand and pretend that it's only about technical things, but you don't want to take on leaping monkeys. And what I mean by leaping monkeys is when someone throws a problem over to you, that monkey now leaped off of their back and got thrown onto your back. Right now, it's your problem. You don't want to do that, right? You don't want to take on everyone else's problems. You want to say, okay, well, let me ask you a couple questions and to get you to think a little differently, maybe give you some advice, but I'm going to give that monkey back to you. Right. But you don't want to hide your head in the sand, and you want to pay attention to those social cues. And of course, you want to be a servant leader, right? You're there as a manager, not necessarily to yes, you're accountable for getting the work done, but you're not necessarily always responsible for getting the work done. You have a team for that. And so you want to be a servant leader. You want to go to them and say, how can I enable you to get the job done faster, better, cheaper, whatever it is? How can I enable you to do your best work? And that may be removing a roadblock in a technical area. Hey, I need a software license. Okay, let me work on that for you, right? Or it may be, hey, you know what? I'm not getting along with the business sponsor. Okay, let's talk about that. Let me go to the business sponsor and get their perspective, and so forth and so on. So you want to be a servant leader. You want to remove roadblocks. It's not just all about status updates and putting pressure on people and things like that. I mean, there is a time and a place to get things done and for the pressure, but for the most part, you want to be a servant leader and help others, help your team accomplish their work, which of course helps you accomplish your goals, which you're accountable for.
Okay, yeah. And so speaking of status updates, how do you obtain accurate status updates? So, we talked a little bit earlier about the intimidation factor. I think that applies to status updates also.
Yeah. So with status updates, as a developer and as a database analyst, something I always like to report on were green statuses, right? Everything's going well. Nothing's wrong. If something is wrong, I'll just keep it to myself because I have hope creep and I don't need to report the yellow or the red. I'll just catch up later, right? And what I learned when I became a project manager is I was giving watermelon statuses, right? Which is green on the outside, red on the inside. And I didn't come up with this term, but I'm going to help explain it here. So you want to avoid these watermelon statuses because when you say everything's going well, all right, your manager, your project manager, your program manager, they believe you. They say, okay, they may prod, they may ask some questions, which is always good, right? But eventually you put them at ease. And now things turn out to be red. Things turn out to be in a little bit of problem, right? A little bit of trouble. Well, what happened was your project manager, your resource manager, they went up the chain and they said, hey, everything's going well. I just checked with Jeremy and he said everything was going well. And I asked a couple of more invasive questions and he convinced me everything's going well. And next week you tell that person everything's not so well. What just happened? you lost trust, right? And so you want to avoid watermelon statuses. You want to be honest because the truth is managers, whether they be project managers, resource managers, that's what they are there for. That's what their job is to help report up the problems and address the problems. And there are going to be problems. If everything's all green, it's instantly a red flag for me. That can't be correct, right? Something had to go wrong somewhere. And it's my job to find out where and to help eliminate or reduce that problem. And by saying, hey, everything's going well, you're robbing them of their opportunity to do that. And that makes you both look bad. And you lose trust along the way, which creates that managers versus employees, which we talked about. So you want to be honest with your status updates. When you go to your boss and you say, hey, I have something that I think is falling behind, right? You're thinking, most people think they're going to hear, oh, well, Jeremy, what did you do wrong? Why can't you catch up? Are you not the right person for this job, right? Everybody assumes that's what's going to happen. But the truth is things just go wrong, right? Things go bad, things go sour, unexpected things come up and you have to address those. And by reporting them and saying, hey, this is yellow, you're going to get other ideas. Well, have you tried A, B, and C? Yes, I did. None of that worked. Well, have you tried D? No, I didn't. Yes, thank you. Let me go try that out, right? So you're going to get ideas on how to get things back on track. Now, if things are red, you're giving the opportunity for that project manager or that resource manager to make changes. Maybe we don't want to continue as an organization down that path. Maybe we want to say, you know what? Now that we're in this situation, it is what it is. Let's shift gears. Let's go a different direction. Or let me add some more people on to help you, right? And that helps you avoid that hope creep as well, right? When it's just you and you're reporting green, it's going to remain just you. When you're reporting yellow and red, you might get some help. And that's how you do that, right? So you may say, hey, I have a red status over here. I need some help with this. And of course, you'll get ideas on how to get things back on track, hopefully. But then you may get some help as well, or you may shift focus. So you want to report honest status updates. And as a manager, of course, when you hear green, it's not just great, thank you, and walk away, because that makes life easy, right? You need to ask more questions to make sure you're not getting a watermelon.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are some really great points. And there's learnings that you can get back and forth. Like I've worked as a manager before and as an individual contributor and went back and forth. And I remember having some individual report that, like I had one guy who was always, panicking, basically, I guess is how I interpreted it at first. And would say, this is at risk, this is at risk, over and over and over. And at first it was like, okay, like maybe we're overloaded, maybe we're doing something wrong, but it would always end up green in the end. And after a while, I started to really appreciate that because, as you said, there's a trust. I knew if this person told me that it was green and good, 100%, knew that it was green and good. If he was telling me every week that, something's wrong, I also trusted that. So then as I became an individual contributor again, that's how I started being to my managers, is like, I'm going to let he or she know immediately, instantly, if there's going to be a risk or a problem, even if I'm annoying them. And so,
yeah.
there's a lot of,
I find that to be the best policy as well. I mean, the faster you tell someone, hey, I have a problem here, the quicker they can act on it. Now, you don't want to cry wolf, right? You do want to do your due diligence, do what you can on the problem. But yeah, when you raise it up as a flag, now it's up to the manager, right? And if they're going to ignore you and push it back on you, well, that's not a very good manager, right? They should be able to at least give you ideas, right? At least point you in the right direction, tell you where to go. And sometimes, like I mentioned, you'll get additional people to help, which is what everybody wants.
Yeah, definitely. So how do team members become comfortable enough to share honest status updates?
Yeah, so that talks that kind of is what we talked about with trust. And the way you build trust, and there are plenty of Pluralsight courses on this as well. But the way you build trust is through honesty, and of course those two things that most technical people just simply want to avoid, and that's emotions and feelings, right? I know the first decade of my career, it was all about the code. It was all about getting things to work and designing things and making these cool things appear online and showing my family what it was. And I avoided the emotions and the feelings. But the truth is, that's how you build a good relationship with your managers, with your coworkers, with your business sponsors, and so forth, even your vendors out there, right? You want to have those personal connections. Now, you don't have to talk about your personal lives the entire time, but you do want to talk about things more than just the nuts and bolts, right? You want to talk about, hey, you know what? You're pretty good at this .NET coding. How did you get into it, right? And just hear a story about how they got into it, and maybe some of the trials and tribulations that they went through. When you share experiences like that, it builds trust, and that's what it's all about. Once you have the trust, and like we talked about, once you have the trust, when someone says, hey, I have a green status, I'm going to ask a couple of follow-up questions. But if I know that person's consistently accurate with their statuses, I'm going to trust whatever they say. And the only thing that's going to get me to ask more questions after a while is when one of those is not green, right? When I received a watermelon and I say, okay, let's go back a little bit. It's not broken completely. It's just maybe cracked. We have to go fix that. And all of that takes time, right? And any change, and a new manager-employee relationship is a big change, right? Any change is a process, all right? And this is something I talk about in my change management series of courses. Change is not a light switch. You can't just flick it on and say, hey, you know what? On January 1st, we're going to go to a new system and you'll be working on that new system. Yeah, good luck. I need training. I need to know how to do my job. I need to know which standard operating procedures changed. I need to know all sorts of things that are going to be changing, and change is a process. It takes time. So you want to be aware of that, and you just want to do your best to just recognize that things don't happen instantly, right? You're not going to have solid trust between a new employee and a new manager right away. You're going to build that over time. And there are two different types of people, right? Those who say you have to earn your trust. And there are those who say, I'm going to give you the trust, and your actions, you may break it, but I'm going to give it to you to start. That's the type of manager I prefer, right? Only because I have been doing this for a while. And when I started a new contract or a new full-time job, you hired me based on my credentials. Let me do my thing, right? But at the same time, I need to be able to show you that you can trust me. Now, if I've got to build that from the ground up, and entry-level employees and even mid-level employees, you're going to have to do that, right? And you should do that. That's how you get experience. And that's how you progress in your career. But yeah, you can either build trust and you can lose trust, but don't forget that it's just a point in time, right? If you don't have trust right now, you can gain it later just by consistently performing and telling honest status updates and delivering on your work.
Yeah, that's great. So what do you think about the term psychological safety?
Yeah, it's a good term, right? It's a good term. It's probably something I rolled my eyes at 10 years ago, to be honest.
That's what I was going to ask. How did you feel when you first heard it, and how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, well, I kind of, like I said, I rolled my eyes at it, 15, 20 years ago when I first heard it. But I'm an absolute believer in it now. I am. And the reason is, if I have a manager saying to me, look, it's okay if you make a mistake, right? It's such a burden off of my shoulders. I don't have the sleepless nights. I'm not logging on to my phone at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., trying to stay on top of things, always thinking about things as I'm getting ready in the morning, right? I can relax, which is going to help me avoid that burnout we talked about earlier. So psychological safety is important. It's also going to enable me to speak up in a meeting. When someone says, hey, do we have any concerns? Well, if you don't have psychological safety, you're keeping your mouth shut and your hand down. But when you have psychological safety, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to say, yeah, I have a concern. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I'm going to throw it out there because I know that by me saying something, it's going to be perceived as a good thing. At least I brought it up, right? And it may be pushed aside, but let's say 10% of the time, even it's taken into account. They say, hey, good idea, Kevin. I'm glad you mentioned that. I completely forgot about it. Or I didn't consider it. And now I feel good. Now we've made progress for the organization, for what I'm doing and for what the team is doing. So yeah, as 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it was, I didn't think much of it. But again, I wasn't a psychology major. I was a computer science major, right? Everything to me was black and white. It was true or false, right? Yeah. And it took experience and it took time and it took failures to realize there is a gray area to everything, including programming and computer science. It may not be in the code, right? IntelliSense may tell me, hey, a squiggly line, you've got something wrong. Yes. But as you know, as all coders know, there are 3 ways to code things, 40 ways to code things. What's to say your way's the best, right? So there is a gray area even in code. And with people, the gray area is huge. And so you need that psychological safety to be able to speak up and to be able to keep your mind clear.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a good topic. How does one transition from individual contributor to manager? And you've talked a little bit about how you've done that in your career. And yeah, it's always a tricky game. So what can you tell us about that?
It is. So I would say there are a couple of ways this can happen, right? One of the ways is you make a decision, hey, I want to try this. I want to be a manager, right? Maybe it's you had a really good manager and you say, yeah, that appeals to me. I want to try that. I want to do that. Maybe you had a really bad manager and you say, you know what? I can do better than that. I'm going to do better than that. Or maybe you just feel like you've been in a role for so long that you feel you can manage. Whatever the reason is, the decision that you make to become a manager, I would say you want to make sure you're prepared. So it's either knowing the business, if you're going to stay within the same company, or if you're going to go to a different company, maybe a different industry, you may have to go get some training. And that's what I did. I wanted to leave development and go to project management. Well, I needed to be trained on project management, not just what I experienced from project managers giving me tasks and leading me and my projects. I wanted to go in and get some training. So I took some courses at a university. I went and got PMP certified and applied for jobs, and I eventually became a project manager. Now, there's another way you can become a leader, and that is in your internal organization. People just keep nominating you to be the person in charge, to be the leader of the group. They say, I know we all report to so-and-so, but I'd rather report to you. Okay, that happens as well. Now, in that instance, that's a little bit different, right? Yes, you should still know the technical know-how of how to do the job, of course, but you've already have the following, right? Somebody asked me a long time ago, what does it take to be a leader? And the answer is a follower, right? If you have a follower, you are a leader, period. Doesn't matter if you're a manager or not. If you have a follower, you are a leader. That person is going to emulate you and go to you for advice and go to you for, when they have questions on things. And so you want to be that best person you can be. And the way I found to do that was, especially coming from a hard technical background, was to really develop my soft skills, right? They call it emotional intelligence now. Back in my day, they called it soft skills, right? Either way, you want to work on those things, such as psychological safety. You need to understand what that is and how to apply it so that you can be a better leader, right? And that's when I started to stop rolling my eyes, is when I actually read about it and watched things on it, and said, you know what, all right, this is a real thing. I have to pay attention, and it is. But you want to also focus on emotional intelligence, right? So everybody knows the golden rule, right? Treat people how you want to be treated. Well, there's a platinum rule. I didn't know this as a developer, right? Treat people how they want to be treated. Doesn't matter how you want to be treated. Treat people how they want to be treated. And so when you start applying that, it's going to be different for different people, right? You can't treat everyone the same, even when you're a manager. And I know from a technical background, right, everything's black and white. You think, well, that's fair. I'm going to treat Jeremy the same as I'll treat Bobby, the same as I'll treat Shelly. It just doesn't work like that. You have different people, you have different desires, different needs, different priorities, and you want to adjust for the person that you're leading.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did kind of bring up, as a technical person, it's a little more difficult, I think, moving into management, because you have this mindset. Like when I started out, I'm like, well, if I'm just a really good programmer, I'll become a better programmer. When I'm a really good programmer, then I'm going to be a lead, and then I'm going to be a manager, and then I'm going to be CIO someday.
Yeah.
And all of that is tied to how well I write code. So it was a bit of a surprise, as I became a team lead, then yes, my coding ability absolutely helped me lead that team. Then I became a manager, and the coding ability was, I wouldn't say useless, but I would say irrelevant to the skills that I needed to be a manager. And is that something that you've experienced also?
Oh, absolutely.
That you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. When I started managing people, and I realized I can't spend, let's say you have a 40-hour work week and you spend 35 of it coding, or doing something technical. When you become a manager, well, that 35 is going to drop, right? Because I need to approve timesheets. I need to go to more meetings. I need to report on status updates, right? So it drops and drops and drops. And the more people you have, the less time you have to do some of the coding. Now, the technical skills are still going to give you that common ground, right? Someone says, hey, this is going to take me 3 weeks. As a technical person, I knew when I was being maybe fibbed to. Hey, you know what? That's going to take 2 weeks. And it's good to have that solid knowledge about that. But it's also good to have the soft skills. It's a different job, right? From developer to senior developer to architect, that's one path. Manager's another. It's a separate job. Having knowledge of the technical skill that you are managing, that team, of course, that's going to help, right? You're going to have a common language to talk about. You're going to be able to help them. You're going to be able to look at their code even and say, have you tried this, this, and this? And every time I did that, people were amazed. Wow, I didn't know you could do this. Yeah, I did it for a decade. So yes, I can do that, but it's been a while, right? And something else I wanted to mention about going into management is every manager that I've ever spoken to has always said, well, I didn't invent this. I didn't learn it. I had a manager who was really great, and he or she did X, Y, Z, right? And so I emulate that. Okay, that's great. And then I also had a manager who wasn't very good, who did ABC, and I don't do that. Okay, that's great too, right? Everybody does that. They say, you know what? I had a manager, and a good manager, and I'm going to take his or her best qualities. I had a bad manager, and I'm going to avoid his or her worst qualities. Great. But eventually, you need to be you, right? Eventually, you are going to be you. You can't emulate other people for 20 years. It's not going to happen, right? And so eventually, your style and your personality are going to come out. Now, hopefully, you've taken those great things, and you've made that part of the way you do things, but you can't constantly be thinking about it. How would so-and-so handle this, right? Well, let me avoid that and let me do it this way. You just got to be you. You are going to be you at some point. And so the sooner you come to terms with that, and the sooner you can really embrace that, the sooner it will happen. And the sooner it happens, the better off you'll be, because it'll be a much more relaxed role. You won't be so uptight and thinking about what's right and what's wrong. You will just do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest traps is, you know, when you have a leader that you've looked to and that you admire and you say, what would he or she do in this situation? That's great, especially when you're in a really tight situation. That might be a great viewpoint to step out and look at. But if you're doing that all the time, constantly, you're going to go on the wrong path. You know, what would he or she do? Yeah. Especially if you don't know, if you're not talking to that person, then you have no idea. You're probably getting it wrong at some point anyway, you know, and it wouldn't be what he or she would do. And you're just kind of going at it blind. So
yeah, and you may be in a different organization now, right? And what your manager did may have been for that industry and that organization and that culture. If you're in a different organization, you have a different culture. It may not work there, or it may work better, right? And so it is different. And something else I'll mention about this is I've had a few managers in my career, you know, do things that I didn't agree with. I had one in particular tell me to do something that I didn't want to do, that I didn't think was right. Well, you know, I want to say 3, 4, 5 years later, reflecting on that, I went, wow, that person was right. It pained me to say it, right? But what you see as a bad decision, a bad manager, right? Oh, that person doesn't know what they're doing. Well, they just may. And you just don't see it. You don't recognize it, at least now. You will later, hopefully. But sometimes the bad decisions really aren't that bad. They're really done for a good reason. And you just need to reflect on it. And that comes with time and experience. But you can also have those open conversations if you have trust. You could say, I don't agree with this. So can you help explain to me, why are we doing it this way? Or why do you want me to do this instead of that? And if you have a good relationship, hopefully that explanation will be given, and you'll grow from that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you'd like, we can jump into some questions here. We've got a couple of questions in chat.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Hernan says, sometimes developers do not figure out that they're in the yellow or red. How can the manager help to report the real status to discover if they can deliver on time or not?
So, you know, the way I've always described it is, green is everything is going according to plan, right? Now, if you're ahead of plan, that's not just a green status. You actually want to say, I'm ahead of plan. This way your project manager can make adjustments, and some of the yellow things can get a little bit more attention, right? If you're in a yellow status, it means it's at risk, right? And you may or may not miss the deadline, miss the deliverable, right? Whatever it is. And of course, if you're red, you're simply not going to make it, whatever the deliverable or deadline is, right? And so if you don't know, you need to go back to your manager and you say, you know what, I'm not sure if I'm green, yellow, or red, and I need to talk to you about it. And then just ask them, how do you define green, yellow, and red? If this particular task that you're asking for an update on, if that were to be yellow, what would that look like to you, right? So that you understand, right? Now, a task may not be code something by the end of the week, right? A task may be, for example, have a conversation with the sponsor and influence them to make a decision to go one way or another. Wow, it may take a week, may take a month. I don't know. Yeah. So how do I report on that? Yes, I've started to have those conversations. Are they leaning one way or the other? I can tell you where I feel they are, but we're not there yet. How do I know when that's yellow or red, right? And so it's just conversations. It's explaining whatever the situation is, and having them determine where you're at. Now they may say, you know what, we're red, we're going to abandon it. You know, the sponsor obviously made a decision for this one thing, so we're going to shift gears and go that way, right? We don't think it's right, but we're going to do that because that's what the sponsor wants, right? So, okay, we do that. If it's yellow, your manager may help out. Your manager may send in reinforcements, right? Hey, let's have a larger meeting around this and explain why we want to do it this way and why we think it's better. And hopefully that'll convince them. So it's a conversation around what is green, yellow, and red. You can't give them an update unless you know what it is. And so it's defining those so that everyone's on the same page. And that may change from task to task.
Yeah, that's absolutely great advice. So what is your opinion on mentor-mentee programs? Have you ever had a mentor in your professional career?
Yes, I have had multiple mentors throughout my career. I think they're great programs. I have very close relationships with my mentors. And I think really it's up to you as the mentee. It's up to you to drive that. That's number one, right? You can't wait for your organization to set this up and you can sign up and so forth. It's up to you to drive it. And as I mentioned before, right, what does it take to be a leader? A follower. In that instance where you were a mentee, you're a follower, right? Who do you want to be your mentor? Go to that person, say, hey, I'd like for you to be my mentor. Actually have that conversation, say those words. It's important, right? If you don't say it, if you just have lunch and say, hey, let me pick your brain on something. Well, you'll get advice for that one thing and you'll move on, right? And if you keep going back to that person, it may feel as though you're taking advantage of them, right? You're getting, you're never giving. But if you say, would you mind being my mentor? Well, now everybody's on the same page, right? This is it's essentially a one-way relationship. It's me providing you information, advice, and so forth. It's me helping you see what you're not seeing as the mentor. And that's okay, right? But I have to agree to it, right? So Jeremy, if I go to you and I say, hey, will you be my mentor? I see what you've done. I like how you approach things. I like your way of thinking. You may say to me, well, Kevin, yeah, that sounds good. How about once a month or once every 2 months? That may not be what I wanted to hear. I was hoping for once a week, but I'll take what I can get. Yeah, so that absolutely works. Or you may say, you know what, Kevin, I've tried this before. It's really not my thing. Okay, at least we're all on the same page, and I'll go find someone else, right? So yes, I absolutely love mentor and mentee programs. And you don't have to be at the same organization, right? This could be a former boss of yours at a different organization. It could be a former coworker who you just simply admired the way they did things and the way they approach things, and you get advice that way. It could be someone you meet on LinkedIn. I have people coming to me saying, hey, Kevin, you are CCMP certified. That's a change manager, certified change management practitioner. You have that certification. And I'd like to get that certification. People I've never met in my life, and they say, can you take a look at my essays, questions, my answers to the questions that I'm going to submit with my application? I'll say, sure. Give me a week. I'll take a look at them and I'll provide some feedback. And I've done that. And that person received their answers. They changed things up. They went and got their certification and they said, thank you for all your help. So in a way, I helped mentor that person. I've never met them in person. I've never spoke to them on the phone. It was all through LinkedIn, but I didn't mind doing it. And it's something, it's a way for me to give back. Now, am I going to do that with every single person? I don't know. It depends on the request, but when someone comes to me for help, I like to help. So yeah, if you have someone you admire, someone you want to go to and ask advice of, I would suggest you do that. Make it a very formal thing. Make it very well known your intentions. And from there, you have to lean into whatever they're willing to do, right? You have to be willing to accept that. If you push too hard, you're going to crush it, right? So don't push too hard. Just accept what they're willing to give.
Yeah, that's great advice. So the next question is, should you take a management role when there's a need, even if you don't get the perks like benefits, access, or are you setting yourself up for resentment?
Well, should you take a management role when there is a need? I would say, let's say you're a developer, front end, back end database, whatever, and your manager leaves the organization and now there's an opening and everybody's nominating you to take it. You can go outside your comfort zone and take it. But if you really don't have an interest in that, think about it. Right? Because an opportunity just came along and you don't want to let opportunities pass without at least thinking about it. And so now, am I going to say jump to that opportunity? No, I'm just going to say think about it, because if it really is not in your heart to do that type of work, to shift your career. And when I say shift, I do mean shift, right? Your technical skills will decline. It's like math, right? If you don't use it, you will lose it. So you have to be willing to accept that. You have to be willing to shift your career. Now, you can go to the hiring manager and you could say, hey, I am interested in this, but I don't know if I want to make a career change yet. What if I don't like it? Can we put a plan in place where after 3 months, 6 months, a year, if I say I want to go back to what I was doing, can I, right? Have that conversation up front. So I would say if an opportunity comes up, don't just jump at it, but don't let it pass either. Think about it. Think about all of the things that you want out of life, right? If it's a higher paying job and you're looking to make more money, just understand that you can do that becoming a manager, but you can also do it in the career you're at now, right? You can have that conversation to say, hey, I'm delivering a lot as a technical person. I just feel I'm underpaid, right? And you can kind of work it from that angle. You don't have to become a manager just to make more money. And as far as benefits or access, I've never received any type of extra benefit for being a manager. I suppose it's out there. I see it on TV, but I've never gotten a car or a parking spot or anything like access to the club. I've never had that, so I can't help you there. Setting yourself up for resentment. I think if you let the opportunity pass without thinking about it, you may regret that later. If you jump into the opportunity too fast, you may regret that later as well. So as I mentioned before, take time to think about it. Talk to those who know you best. Whenever I have this approach in my life, I talk to my wife first and foremost. She's going to give me the best advice because she knows me better than myself, right? I'm going to talk to my mother. I'm going to talk to my son. I'm going to talk to all of my close friends because they know me and they know what's going to make me happy and what's not. So I would say get outside advice, outside opinions from those who you trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So our next question, how do you bridge the gap where you are a team lead that is helping your manager manage a team with a specific project? Says it becomes difficult to manage in your own way while supporting their management style. One method I use is to communicate with him and communicate often. However, I feel there are more ways to co-manage more effectively. So what are some different ways to deal with co-management? I think.
Yeah, co-management, it can be tough, right? If there's not a clear person at the top, right? If you're a team leader and you're working with another team leader with this common goal, let's say you're not even on the same team, right? You're in different groups, but you're on the same project, and so you're both team leaders of your respective groups, and you have to work together for the better of the organization. It can be tough. I would say first and foremost, build a relationship with that person. So if you don't know them, if this is the first time you're meeting them, or if you've only saw them in passing, you want to get together, right? And that's tough. That's tough right now with people working from home, right? I can't say, hey, let's go out to lunch together, right? People haven't been doing lunches for a year and a half now. It's tough. But you can say, I'd like to set up a Zoom call. I'd like to have a virtual conversation with you for a half hour where we shut off email and you and I just talk. I've done that. And it helps. It helps to have that personal connection, right? When you're working on the same team in the same group, you can overhear conversations in the cubicle or the office over. I can't do that when I'm at home. So you actually got to go out of your way to set these things up and build that relationship. Once you have that relationship, yeah, it can still be difficult, right? Because every team, every group goes through a cycle, right? And I'm drawing a blank on the person who came up with this, but it's forming, storming, norming, performing, right? And stage one is when you're forming. Everybody's afraid to step on each other's toes, right? If Jeremy, if you and I were to co-team lead everything, I would say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Is that okay with you? And you would say, yeah, that's good. Thanks for asking, right? But at some point, we just want to start doing it, right? We want to start getting into our groove. And I'm just going to start making decisions, and I'm going to step on your toes, and you're going to step on my toes. And that's the storming phase, right? Hey, could you please just run that by me next time? No problem. And then what about this and this and this? Well, no, you don't have to run that by me. Just this one particular thing that really gets to me. No problem, right? That's our storming phase. And then we're going to norm, we're going to come back up the slope, and things are going to normalize. We're going to learn each other, right? And we're going to learn what you like, what you dislike, what I like, what I dislike, and so forth. And then we're going to perform. We're going to know each other so well that I already know what you're thinking. I don't need to ask. Or on certain things, I know exactly what to ask and how to phrase it so that you understand it, and we have a good connection, right? So that is, again, change is a process. Forming, storming, norming, performing is a very common paradigm. And I would just recommend taking the effort to set things up intentionally, especially if you're working from home, so that you can start that process, but it will take time.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we've got one last question here. I'm trying to discover if I like being a manager or not. What is it you like about being a manager? How do I find passion in management? Find my passion in management.
Okay, so as far as what I like in being a manager, and even though I am a consultant right now, I have subcontractors out there and so forth. I like helping others reach their potential. All right, I like working with other people. I like helping people. It's what fulfills me, and that's ultimately why I got into this, is because other people were coming to me and saying, we're all developers, we're all part of the same team, but they would come to me for advice. They would come to me for help, whether it be technical or social, right? Hey, how do I work with this person better, and so forth. Let's say, well, why don't you try this, right? So I was becoming a leader, and then it was just a matter of making the official shift to manager. But for me, it's helping others. Now, if you're the type of person, and be honest with yourself, right? If you're the type of person who doesn't like to help others, you're more internal, you're more focused on yourself. That's okay. That's you. That's okay. Maybe management is not for you, and that's all right. Or maybe you manage a small team of 1 to 2 people. That's okay. But if you want to help as many people as you can, and maybe you have a large group, who knows? But that's what I like about it, is I like when I can see other people grow, and to know that I've helped in that in some small way. That's just very rewarding to me. How do you find your passion in management? I would say it comes with time, right? Again, time. People who are new managers will always emulate the good and try to not duplicate the bad from what they've seen from theirs. So I would say, how do you find your passion? Become you. Be you. And that's first and foremost, because only once you're you will you know if you even like it. Otherwise, you're being someone else and you may not like that, but you think it's the right thing to do. So be you. And then see how things go. If you are constantly failing at it, it's not always a bad thing. You're learning, right? I mean, if you're failing, you're learning. And if you're constantly succeeding, my tendency is to think that someone's not telling me the truth, right? Like, how can I not make a mistake in the past 2 weeks? I had to make a mistake, so I got to find out where it is, right? So I would say the sooner you are you, the better. And then failure does not mean failure long term. It means failure right now, and that's okay. That's how you grow. If it's a technical failure, that's an easy fix. You hop on Pluralsight, you watch a course, you get online, you read an article, you do whatever you need to do to get the technical understanding. If it was a social failure, I spoke to someone the way I shouldn't have. I said something that was insensitive. Okay, you can fix that too. There are soft skill courses out there and training out there that you can do to better yourself, even if it's not in your wheelhouse, right? And it certainly wasn't in mine. I was a black and white developer, very technical. I am completely on the other side of the spectrum now with soft skills, because once I started to learn about them and once I started to apply them, I saw the difference and I thought, wow, this is so much better. And it hooked me. I loved it. And so that I went the other way. And now I may still program on my own time to do my own little small things, right? But no one's paying me to do it. So yeah, I've completely gone the other way. So I would say you can learn things. You can try things out. And it's just like a kid trying out multiple sports, right? I may try baseball. I put my son in baseball, soccer, and hockey. And he ended up gravitating towards one instead of the other. That's okay. That's what you're doing. You're saying, you know what? I've done the technical thing for so long. Let me try this out. If it works, great. If I don't like it, go back. It's not a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us for this today.
Yeah,
This has
thank
been
you,
really
Jeremy. It was
great.
great.
Do you have any final thoughts for anyone on the webinar?
Yeah, so I would say, in addition to if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter, I'm at Kevin Miller IT, and I have a website, deltatechnology.net. But I believe that true success in IT, it comes from marrying the solid technical foundation, okay, as well as the ability to work with others and adapt, right? Once you have all of those, that's where true success in IT comes from. Just one without the other, you're going to succeed in some areas but fail in others. And when you start bringing those things together, really you and everybody around you is going to do much better.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. As I stated up in the beginning, this is being recorded and will be sent out here in a few days. If you were